Okay, so how to build a website for the IndieWeb. I realize no one knows about the IndieWeb, so let me give a short introduction about this term. So IndieWeb is both a community of people and also the websites these people built for themselves and the protocols they developed and they designed to help people build other websites like them, like theirs. This is a short presentation. I try to give you an introduction about the whole thing, but you can also find the presentation online in this GitHub repo. It's a website, it's already deployed. So who is this guy? I'm Giacomo. I'm a freelance full-stack developer and also a web performance consultant. I develop mostly in TypeScript and Clojure. Sometimes I write Zig for fun. And also for fun, I do surf skating and inline skates. These are not the emojis of these sports. And so we lost some colors here, unfortunately. But if you are like a kid from the 80s or 90s, you probably don't remember the so-called golden age of the internet. So the late 90s, early 2000s are sometimes referred as the golden age of the internet. It was a different time. The web was a little bit weird, but for some aspects more interesting. And we had more, I would say, more choice and more deliberate choice. We decided to go on a particular website and then visit the website maybe for like 2 hours a week and not like 8 a day. And we didn't have smartphones, or at least they were not as prevalent as they are today. And for sure, we didn't have recommendation systems that we have in social networks that we have today. So definitely we had more control, more deliberate choice, and more decentralization. So the problem today, this is like a wall emoji. Unfortunately, you cannot see it. And so the problem with these big websites today, these social networks, is that they are silos of content. They contain a lot of content that we publish online, and we publish this content on those sites, and only on those sites. It doesn't get outside of this these walled gardens that easily. So the idea of the IndieWeb is to build websites that are like independent from these huge silos of content. And this is important because when our identity is tied to a silo, then it's not portable. You cannot Facebook friend a Twitter account, for example. And it's also really hard to interact with people with that are from a different site. And also they can simply die. They can be shut down, maybe because the development team get acquired or the site just dies. So perhaps you are done with others owning your content, your identity, and yourself. So what you can do about it? You can reclaim your content and self-host it. So the first thing that you can do if you want to go down this path is to buy your own domain and then keep paying for that. It's a small investment, like 10, 20 euros a year. You just go to a domain registrar, you buy a domain, and then you build something on that domain. And you need a domain and not just a subdomain, because the subdomain is not yours. If you build something on example.github.io, you are not the owner of that thing. It's github.io the owner of that thing. One cool thing that you can do when you have your domain is log into website using on just your domain name. Admittedly, this is not so common, but you can do it with some websites. So the website presents you a login form like this. You enter your domain, and then you sign in. The website then delegates authentication to an authentication protocol that can be either Realme Out, for example, or IndieOath. So let's see Realme Out. Realme Out, you basically use it as by linking two identities. One identity is your domain that you own. The other identity is another identity that you control. But that identity is owned by another provider, for example, your GitHub account. So how does it work? How do you configure it? On your website, you can add the Realme links either in the body, in anchor tags, or in the head as link tags. And now the provider, for example, your GitHub account, you go to your profile page, you go through some verification process, and you say that you are the owner of that domain. For example, I own giacomodebidda.com, and on my GitHub account, I say that I own that website, that domain. You can also go to indiewebify.me, validate Realme to check that you configure the Realme links correctly. Let's see an example. IndieWeb.org is a website that supports web sign-in with Realme Out. And on my website, I have this Realme link in the head. And on IndieWeb.org, if I go to if I visit IndieWeb.org, IndieWeb.org shows me a login form. I enter my domain name. I get redirected to the authorization endpoint that presents me all the options that I have to link to enter my website, to enter IndieWeb.org using Realme Out, using these providers. I pick, for example, my GitHub account, which is the third entry. And I get redirected to the login page, to the profile page of IndieWeb.org. This is cool, and it's really easy to do, but there is a problem. I'm using GitHub as the owner of my identity. If I want to own my identity as well, I have to use a different protocol. That's why the IndieWeb community developed the IndieOut protocol. So IndieOut is an authentication protocol, which is built as an identity layer on top of OAuth 2.0. OAuth 2.0 is an authorization framework. It's not the most common authentication protocol. The most common protocol today is probably OpenID Connect. So let's see a quick showdown of the differences between these two protocols. So in this slide, I try to list all the differences, but the two most important ones are that with IndieOath, you have a single unique identifier, which is a URL that you control. It's a URL that you have on your domain. And you don't have this unicity on OpenID Connect. So with IndieOath, you basically have, since you own your domain, it's the domain name system that guarantees that your domain is unique. So I own giacomodebidda.com, and there is a guarantee that nobody else in the world owns that domain. Maybe they own giacomodebidda.it.de, but not .com. So any URL that I have on my domain is unique, and I can use it as a unique identifier. With OpenID Connect, I delegate my authentication to a provider, like, say, for example, my GitHub account, and the owner of that identity is GitHub. If I log in with Facebook, my OpenID Connect provider is Facebook. This leads to the problem of having different identities, different multiple providers for my identity. And my identity is not portable. I cannot convert a Facebook account to a GitHub account. So the identity is tied to that provider. With IndieOath, the identity is portable because my domain, I own my domain. I bought it on Cloudflare, I think. But if next year I want to change and then use Namecheap, for example, I can do it. It's completely portable. There are also some differences about the tokens that you have with the two authentication providers. For example, OpenID Connect defines an identity token, so you have an identity token and also an access token. With IndieOath, you just have an access token. So it's definitely a simpler algorithm, but for most of the tasks, it's probably OK. Something that you probably had to do if you are a developer and if you had to develop LinkedIn app or GitHub app or a Facebook app, you had to go through the registration process because the provider had to give you a client ID and a client secret. You don't have to do it with IndieOath because it's the URL itself, the client ID. Or more precisely, it's a URL it's a URL of your app that you control, that it's the client ID. So let's see an example. The IndieBookClub.biz is a website that supports IndieOath, and /ID is the client ID of this app. If you can make a GET request to this URL, you will see that the client ID is the URL itself, so you didn't have to register an OAuth application to do that. And here we can see we have the 3 entries that we had before for Realme Out, and then we have a second entry from the top. It's IndieOath, so you can log in using IndieOath. So how does it work? So we have basically 3 actors: the server, the client, and the website that wants to use IndieOath for authentication. The server is just a bunch of endpoints. It's the authorization endpoint that gets you authenticated, the token endpoint that mints or issues the token, And then optionally, you have the token revocation endpoint, the token introspection endpoint, and the user info endpoint, where you can get info about the user, not from the token, but you need to have a different system to get information from the user. On your website, you have to either have a link in the head or serve the page with a link header, because you need to list all the endpoints that you want to use. These endpoints are either services that you decide to rely on, or services that you yourself developed and host. So theoretically, you could self-host everything. And in the scope supported, the application that mints the token decides which scopes are supported in the token. One other idea of the IndieWeb is to own your content. So the idea is to publish something everything on your site first, and then maybe later cross-post it on to other social networks. The IndieWeb particularly likes acronyms, so they use POSSI as an acronym. It stands for Publish on Your Own Site first, and then later, maybe, syndicate elsewhere. Syndicate is basically a synonym for cross-posting. This is important because then everything you post on your site has the canonical URL, so this is also good for search engine optimization. When you publish something, you should try to wrap your content in a few HTML classes. Why is this important? Because your website probably doesn't have an API, so you need to help third-party clients to consume your content. And you can do it by marking your HTML with semantically meaningful classes. So let's see an example. Barry Frost has one of the best IndieWeb websites. And on his homepage, he has a few HTML classes. Not many, as you can see, like 4 or 5 lines of HTML. And if you go to a validator to see what Barry has on his homepage, you can see like a card with all the information. And this means that the client understood that these information are well structured. And on an article of his blog, as you can see, there are a few more classes to say basically what is what. So this is the content of my article, the date the article was published, etc. And when you publish something, you should try to use a protocol like micropub. And it's basically a publication protocol, you could say, built on top of IndieOut, not exactly, but like that. And there are 3 actors, a client, a server, and a website that wants to use my micropub. And this is the process that, of course, we don't have the time to go through, but you can have a look at this maybe later. Any micropub client has to discover the micropub endpoints that you want to post your content to. And as an example, IndieBook Lab has a way to discover these endpoints and send the content to the endpoints that you decided to send your post to. So cross-posting means, syndication means cross-posting. So you publish something on your first, and then you cross-post it to other social networks. Because, of course, realistically, nobody will ever read your blog, but maybe they will interact with your content on social networks. So with syndication, you can take your content from your blog and post it to LinkedIn, for example. And with backfeed, you can take that content back, take the interactions on the social network, and then repost it to your blog. So you can answer questions, replies, and likes on your blog instead of going to LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. There are protocols designed for that. It's not easy to do because it's not particularly hard, but there are a lot of steps involved. So you can use a service like Bridget to do that. And these reactions are basically converted into web mentions that are like a standard for reacting to content on the internet. You fetch them. Maybe you help people by including a form on your website. And basically, this is the recap, what you should do to build a website for the IndieWeb. First of all, you should go to the Getting Started page and read about it. It's not particularly long. It's very well written. Then buy a domain if you don't already have one. Build a website, host your content on it, write your content in microformats, because then it's easy to consume. Publish your content on your site first, syndicate it elsewhere, so use a POSI approach. Then take the content back and have fun. That's it.